I want to ask you because this is the type of film that is different from your other film. And when did you get involved in the film from the very beginning? They start shooting very early on.
Very early on,
Yeah.
yes. I think she shot for more than 4 or 5 years,
Yes.
kind of thing. And it was the National Film Board who called me, National Film Board of Canada. I knew Anita Lee from a long time ago, the producer. And one day she called me and said there was this project that they also came on board quite late after that it was shot, and they had already done some first editing with the support of a producer in the States and Alpha. And so the film board decided to come on board and decided that they decided together that they needed an experienced editor. So naturally, it was either Jean or me.
Yes. So they must have hundreds of hours of footage and
Yes.
more than these main characters. Were they already chosen, or you find them in the editing room?
No, they were already chosen, but they were not. For example, the Chinese lady, she was not the original. Tiffany had actually, when she showed me the trailer and sort of a first selects, it was another lady. And then something happened, and which is quite in the theme of the film, because the family of that lady decided they didn't want the story to be told. So she had to find another lady, yeah. And so this was, yeah.
Well, you talk about, the prologue. I can see your style of prologue at the beginning. Is that?
Yes, we looked for a prologue, and always found it together. But the mountains and all that, like everything that happened is a little bit always accidental, and then we came upon the shot of this mountain. And I don't even remember in this case whether it was Anita, it was me, or Tiffany who didn't, just fell in love with the mountains, and that it was. And then of course the fourth element of that prologue was Leslie Barber, the composer, who then she composed the music to go perfectly with the mountain shot. Yeah. But the for the rushes, it's true that it's huge, and for a time it was. They also had a huge job of translation, because of course we couldn't really do all the editing without the translation, and even the Chinese part was in a dialect that we couldn't understand. So a lot of time was spent on translation and waiting for translation. Yeah.
So in the Chinese story, the filmmaker appears a lot. Is that your idea, or it was like that was shot that way?
It was shot that way, but on the other hand, there was a lot of discussion about the role of the filmmaker in the film. Because as a lot of first-time directors, she wasn't sure whether she wanted to appear in the film. But I think one of the reasons that I accepted to do this in the footage that I saw, and the trailer, one of the first trailers that she made, I told Anita that what was interesting to me was the transmission from these older ladies, the communication, the bonding with this very young woman. And that for me was very, very interesting. So I really wanted to have that element in the film, which was in the Chinese part, especially since she couldn't really understand that dialect, and because herself, in fact, she speaks Mandarin, but she's Canadian Taiwanese. I mean, her parents are Taiwanese, but her Mandarin is sort of learned. So yeah, she had this interesting exchange with Grandma Chow, because she's like guessing some
Yeah.
of what she's saying. Yeah.
The bond is so obvious, and it was very touching when she felt the smoothness
Yes.
of her skin, and versus the age and youth, and that shot is already told a lot of story, and time has passed.
And
So-
there's actually, we had some sort of restrictions of time. I mean, we didn't want to make the film too long. This is already an hour 45. So we're trying to keep it down, keep it under 2 hours. So we had to sacrifice a lot of things. And one of the scenes that we had to sacrifice was something in the Philippines, which was a lovely scene. We kept it to the very, very last version. It was the lady, the Filipino lady, and her friends, and they were dancing around, and then they started to talk about bras. They're talking about buying bras and things, and then they were joking around, and they were saying to Tiffany, well, you see, one day it will happen to you. They will sag too. And it's again this kind of joke about aging and so on. We managed to keep one shot at the very end in the montage sequence. You see one Filipino lady dancing, and that was from that scene.
Yeah, it's very powerful, theme and images, and it's the lady, the Grandma Jean. She's just so wonderful. I mean, did the filmmaker Tiffany find her at the very beginning?
Yes, because Tiffany was working with this council,
Yeah.
and so the council organizes this place, this place where Grandma Gil was staying. So it was quite early on that, I mean, Grandma Gil is one of the most, she's still going around the world doing this.
She's still
yes.
around.
She was in Paris not too long ago, and
Wow.
in the States often and all that. So it was not her last trip, and
Wow.
she's still going on. And that there was another lady with Grandma Gil that said that, again, we had to sacrifice some of her scenes. Yeah.
Well, it's tough to have three characters and who you sacrifice, and so in this case, with you have the producer and film, you have also, I saw, she said written, because she's probably helped structure the film and their story. Also, Deanne was helping with the story, so this is very different from the way you work. Can you talk about the collaboration perspective?
Yes. So I would say that Anita was really one of Anita Lee, who's the producer.
Mm-hmm.
She's really one of the pillars of this film, because on the one hand, Tiffany has all the fire and the energy and the enthusiasm and the vision, and really the physical thing of going over the place to film this, but Tiffany was like a wild horse. So there was like this massive things of material, and when I got on board, I was completely new on it. So there was no way I could navigate my way through, and so Anita was the one who was familiar with the footage, because she had worked for months with Tiffany before, going through the footage and things. And she also had the experience of structuring films, of structuring documentaries. And at the same time, a woman, an Asian woman. She's Canadian, Korean Canadian, and so she was able to be the voice of reason, because very quickly I was the voice of passion for Tiffany. So we were the sort of passionate bond, and Anita was the voice of reason. And so it was an extremely fruitful collaboration, 3 ways that way. And then the thing is that also logistically it was there were some challenges, because Tiffany was in Toronto, Anita was in Toronto, Chris, the associate producer, he's sometimes in California, sometimes in Taiwan, and I was in Paris, and I wanted to edit in Paris, so they sent over these huge drives, and they even sent over a complete computer. They sent a whole computer over, and I went over there. So Tiffany came for the first trip, and she set up all these things where I was not there, and then I went over to Canada, and went over with them. She worked with a young assistant editor that I recommended because I've worked with this young woman for several films, and she is also now an editor and an artist in her own right. And she and Tiffany started getting along really well. So but they got, when I got to Toronto the first time, they had a rough cut of 9.5 hours. But this was like Anita in the beginning when she got me on board. She said, we'll get somebody and we'll do a rough cut so that that it would be not so much work to structure the film and so on. But I got, of course,
9 hours.
and that it wasn't a rough cut. And then when we all looked at what they did, we realized that it wasn't structured. It wasn't the way that it was supposed to be. So then back to zero, and then I was doing this for several months in Paris, and with a sort of team viewer and all those kind of long distance things. They had an identical set of drives, and then I went back to Canada for a month in February, in the deep freeze kind of thing. We worked some more together, and then I went back to Paris, worked some more, and I wanted the film I wanted the first cut, or at least the cut, to be finished, to be locked by July, because my grandson was going to be born in August in Hangzhou, and there was no way I was going to work during the month of August, but it was not to be. But so we had to find a solution. Like towards the last few months, because I was very busy with something else, Anita also got this other lady editor to get on board to do technical, like sort of cutting whatever that they needed modification, and then sending the timeline over, and I would say sort of arrange things and maybe shift things and stuff like that. So it was like having a pair of hands to help out. It's just such a massive project, and so that worked out that way with some technical hiccups. But for example, the last part when they went to the UN. So it was something that happened, or that was put in place after my first rough cut, actually. I don't remember why, but anyway, so then they put this sort of rough sequence there, a sort of montage sequence, when in the part where they went into the room and they couldn't film, and so they put in a sort of montage sequence, and so I fixed it. I mean, I changed it in a way that somehow for me, by that time I think we were working with a guide track already from Leslie, and somehow it's like that kind of thing that I talked about last night. It's a sort of something that was like a feeling that I decided to put in a few black frames in between this kind of flashes, and then black, the music would start, and then, some flash. And so when they got the timeline back, Anita said, are those black frames intentional? Because actually, she really loved those. She just thought that all of a sudden that the whole thing just made sense now. It just has this kind of poetic feeling. And that is something that is so mysterious. I mean, I would never be able to explain why I all of a sudden decided to put in a few black frames in between those. It's just that it's when I just felt that at that time, when you have this montage sequence of all the key moments all lumped together, it's somehow too dense. It would be, things like that. So it's all collaboration. Yeah.
It's the trend now to do like global editing. You have identical, pair of a drive, and you can send timelines. Were you editing in Final Cut Pro or?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's easy, but of course Apple decided not to continue Final Cut Pro 7.
But it's been several years. They said that, and we're still, everybody said, "Oh, you're still doing Final Cut Pro 7," but everybody's still doing Final Cut Pro 7. Well, I think we'll have to change to something else someday. But yeah.
But shall we open this for
sure.
questions? Any aspiring editors in the room, or want to know more about how you condense 9 hours assembly, that we call assembly, to an hour and a half or hour 45 minutes film?
Thank you very much. I'm Tony, and a PCL student at this university. I was also Alpha Education past intern, and I really appreciated that this film was shown and having you here today. I would like to ask, how about the educational version? Was it also edited by you because it was condensed into 34 minutes?
Yeah, I just realized that, in fact, I just heard about it last night. I know that there's an educational version that was the agreement, but no, I have nothing to do with it. Yeah.
And also what I heard from my previous screenings and understanding, it was like there was a seed fund given to Tiffany in the very beginning by Alpha, but because due to the lack of funding, it was like the National Film Board which stepped in order to complete the whole process. And also she was somehow really got into understanding this sort of issue later until she joined one of the educational trips organized by the organization. Yeah. That was the really great inspiration that she got in order to build up her fire, as you have mentioned.
Yeah, that's right. That there was an educational trip that she learned about all these issues, and that in fact we still have all the footage from that. And of course, the process that we went through, we did go through several structures possible. Like I looked into different things, including the footage from that trip. And of course, you get tempted to try different things, like the historical things and so on. But there are just so many versions of this that yeah, that there was no way. There's another part that is sacrificed in the last version that I still regret, which is sort of masks on the wall of this museum, which is a sort of surrealistic sequence of these masks and just music. But it's, on the other hand, it's like you know, we have to balance the somehow find a balance in the style of the information, of the emotion, of the lyrical passages and so on. So yeah.
It's an all-women's team. on
It's
this.
almost an all-women team, because at the premiere, Tiffany was saying, "Oh, all-women team," because we had a wonderful man, the sound designer Danielle, who, when she said that, I turned to Danielle and said, well, "I hope you don't mind," but no, he's a sweet guy. It's like it's just amazing, the sound design in this. So I think that he did mind, but no, he was the only man in the key. Yeah, in the key. And sorry, and I forgot to add one thing, is that when they were looking for when Anita was looking for an editor, it was very difficult to find, because she wanted somebody experienced. She wanted somebody that, because Tiffany was extremely, at that time, it's her first film and so on, her baby for so long, and she was very wary of the fact that she had to have an editor. So it had to be a woman. She has to be Asian, and she has to be patient and sort of motherly but firm, and all kinds of things. There was all kinds of conditions. So that's why I said, wow, who else could it be? You know?
Yes. Well, and also it's sort of the, probably understand at least the Chinese part of it, a
Yes.
little bit.
A little bit, very little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the translation I can see huge, because without the translation you can't even start.
No.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yes.
Hi, I'm also from the law faculty, and so I don't really know anything about filming. So I saw that it was written by Tiffany, but you were the editor, so I'm kind of confused as how you guys sort this out. Like, does she have a clear image of how this film should be, or do you have a stronger say, or like, do you have to convince her to change her mind if you have a new idea that she didn't have? And also my other question is, what kind of message did you want to convey to the audience through this film? Was it intended to be more educational, or is it more like a protest to the Japanese government? Like, what did you want this film to achieve, I guess? Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I don't have a message, because this is clearly Tiffany's film, and she had sort of endorsed. She had put on her back a kind of mission, which was to tell these grandmother stories. She was like deeply moved by learning about this episode, this what happened, and then she learned more and more and more, and there was a personal resonance that we didn't explain in the film, but there's something very personal about it as well, and so she became extremely emotionally involved. So my work and Anita's intention was to help her get her message or communicate what she wanted to communicate with this film. The difficulty was that being a very young and a first-time director, and being very respectful of us elders, and she was, there was some difficulty for her to express what she wanted. so sometimes we would move into the wrong track, and then it was a long time afterwards that she said, "But I would prefer this." You know, we said, "Well, Tiffany, why didn't you say it in the first place?" You know, because we're there to make it happen for you. You know, so it's when you say written by, and that's something, of course, that we know in documentaries, that it's very ambiguous. How, you know, when you say written and directed by, written by, what does it mean? Because I think that in this case, I think definitely that the idea was hers, the journey was hers, the what she wanted to say was hers, and then you could say that both Anita and myself, we helped her write it, and we were, you know, sometimes doing the writing ourselves, but it was her writing. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, hello, hi, Mary.
Hello.
Yeah, just one. How do you find the structure of the film? Yeah, finally, because I think that this is a really touching and powerful film for me, and it seems that I can't. There's no climax in. I can't. There's no climax in the film, but I feel every moment is really emotional for me. Can you explain more about that?
Well, I think that we basically is the three places, the three countries. We try to structure it by the three countries and trying to find a balance in the three. And then very quickly we realized that Grandma Gil and the Korean story is really the backbone of the film, because so Grandma Gil and the Korean story, what was it? So we realized that we decided that it was that mission of going to the UN. So with that, we could structure it that way, because she filmed practically every Wednesday demonstration. So what would you do with, you know, like 500 demonstrations? So we had to build it up towards that final UN submission of the signatures, and then of course the difficulty was to find a balance between the two other stories and her and this Korean story. So we had to really look for the connection of the Filipino lady who was looking at the tape of and the Chinese story. It's just, yeah, it was obvious. Yeah.
I guess that's probably fine in the editing room, because that thread is really, you build to that thread. Otherwise, it's just the same story over and over again.
Yeah.
Well, then you have to have a journey, and then
Right,
the signing
exactly.
of it,
Yeah.
the signature collection is
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
powerful, because that's really, at least that's some sort of advocacy, or something she wants to do, is to have more people know about it and demand an apology eventually. I think it was not, they still haven't
Well,
issued
you
the-
know, it's that what is really strange about it is that just before the film was finished, there was at Christmas time a sudden decision between the two governments, the Japanese government to issue an apology, and the Korean government signed it quickly, with some money involved and so on. And then there was a huge protest, but the conditions also in the agreement was that the Koreans would take down this statue in front of the Japanese embassy, and that the issue would never be mentioned again. It would never be negotiated or mentioned again. And there was a huge amount of protest, because the involved people, the involved parties, said that there's so obviously a sort of, you know,
Bio.
yes, it's something between the government. They had agreed for some other reasons, and that the grandmothers were never consulted, so so they couldn't accept it. So they are still going on for a proper sort of consultation, and so now it's a gongok. It's a stalemate for now.
I believe the statue is now in San Francisco.
Yeah, there's one. Yeah, so
In
instead
City
of
Hall.
taking them down, they're putting more of them up.
One question?
Hello, I'm Claudia. I'm from CUHK and I study the anthropology. I would like to ask, what is the power of documentary to the victim? Because we have seen so much a very strong message conveyed to us, the audience. But what do you think is the power of you filming this documentary to the comforting woman? Because I've noticed that, for the Philippines case, the lady said one of her biggest wish is to tell the story to her son. So, do you think right the moment you film the documentary, you add a motivation for her to giving her the courage to tell her son the whole story?
That was actually what happened. That is actually what happened during the filming, because this is only that I can only tell what Tiffany told me, because it was through the filming and so on that, through knowing Tiffany and the fact that she was coming to film and that they became quite close, that she decided she had the courage to go and tell her children, tell her family, because she had hidden it all through these years. There was, again, other scenes that we had to sacrifice when she talked about how she met her husband and so on, that he was the most wonderful man that she had ever seen, and she would never have dared to tell him because she was afraid of losing him. And then of course she never told her children, because it's this sense of shame that she was hiding this story. And so in fact it was really the fact that she befriended Tiffany and that's sort of also that transmission thing, that again, that scene with Tiffany sitting on the mattress and the older lady, that every time I want to find this bonding between the very young Tiffany and the much older woman. And I think that when you say the power, I think documentaries can be a tool of information as well, of course. That, in Korea, this was released. There was a general release of the film, so it actually played in several cinemas for many, many weeks. So there's everywhere it goes, there's this possibility of informing people, and that of course is also used in terms of advocacy and in terms of human rights festivals and so on. But I think for myself, one of the most moving and powerful sequences is when Grandma Gill goes to this girls' school in Tokyo, in Japan, and when the Japanese girls they start to cry and to apologize. That is the most amazing thing. I mean, that is really the thing is to be communicating to the next generations, and that Grandma Gill has this sort of quite a naive kind of faith that by doing this, she can keep it from happening again. I mean, well,
Can I have one more follow-up question? Like, I'm so sorry. I have noticed that you have there's many super close-up of the grandma's faces in the documentary. So, what message do you want to convey to us if you like close up to the facial expression? Do you want us to emphasize on the emotion, or do you want us to actually remember this this woman?
well, I think you have to answer that question. What did it do for you? So it's like, you know, you would probably answer it by that you will remember that face, and that it gave you a sense of emotion, and that was the purpose. Yeah, we did have longer shots, but it's true that I think we all love this sort of expressions and the lines on their faces, and yeah.
Okay, last two questions.
Thank you. So there's an intriguing sequence when the Korean grandmothers visit Shenyang, and then they start singing about reunification between South Korea and North Korea. Can you talk more about this?
Yes, that is like for us a decision to make. You know, there were so many sequences we had to really decide which ones we wanted to keep. That was one of the key things that we wanted to keep, because Grandma Gill's story was not only about being taken and being used as a comfort woman, but that she missed the boat going back. She went on the wrong boat, or wrong train, or I don't remember, but that she didn't get back to her hometown in North Korea. She ended up in South Korea, and she never saw her family again. So she has a double tragedy, and so that trip was sort of a secret trip, and that, you know, the North Korean delegation came out and that would be meeting the South Korean Comfort Women delegation. So it was a very emotional time. That it was the first time that Grandma Gill saw women from North Korea again, which is her home country. So and that both the North Korean delegation and the South Korean, this this kind of very deep wish to be together again, to be able to, yeah.
One last
Hi,
question.
hello, Mary.
Hi.
And I thank you for the great film. And I want to ask, like, how can you select, like, for the Korean grandma? And I noticed that in some conference or some activities, and she just say, like, when I was 13, and then it's stopped, and to another scene. So I want to know why. Because I watched some films about those kind of themes before. So others film is focused on they tell more details about what they suffered before, and like telling the whole story or more details. So I want to know why, like in this film, you not pay more attention about those they suffered before, and it's different angles, I think. So how can you balance the methods you want to like tell us? How can they like live in today's life, or how can they face in the past, or etc.?
Actually, I'm not sure I understand. Like, you mean that we don't know enough of how they live today?
No, I mean the three ladies, they haven't tell us the more details about what the real happened in the past.
I thought that they
And-
did.
They did actually.
but not totally. Like for others, documentaries, they like use the whole story to tell all of the audience more details and like the like pay more attention about the story they suffered before, but not now. But actually, this film I found a new angle is about the like the contrast. The today nowadays and the past. So.
I think that there are two reasons to that. First of all, I think that, I mean, for me, I think I told everybody's story in terms of they each one of them. There's a passage where they tell about the first time, how they got taken and how scared they were and how they suffered, and then the childbirth, and the Chinese ladies talked about how she strangled her own baby, and there are a lot of horrible details in fact each one of them, their stories. But I think the second point is that it is true that we want to tell a contemporary story. That is from the very first day with Anita and Tiffany, that word comes up again and again. Contemporary story we want to tell. We decided quite deliberately not to go into historical like archives and pictures of from history books and old photos from archives and so on. We decided not to do that because we want to tell from the grandmothers today, their contemporary story. And whenever they talk about, like what happened in the past is from their own memory, the way that they remember it or the way that they want to tell it. So I think that's what you mean, is that it's not a historical archival film. That is not our intention. We want to tell these three old ladies their contemporary story, what their struggle is today. Also, that when we were doing this film, we looked at all the research material. There are a lot of films about this. There are a lot of quite good films. So we were able to see what were made. So there's no point in making them again. There was actually, especially one film, I forgot the name of this. We did want to take a little part of it at the very end, and it didn't work out. And in fact, by that time, we had already gone in another direction. Yeah.
No, I think that what you mentioned when she was 13 is the way before she went to UN, and you heard the story before, so it's no point of repeating. And it's by moving the story forward, it's about the boxes being delivered and what's going on next. So you see how the films try to move forward by this women's story.
Yes, the part when she was 13 actually was told much earlier. When she was, she told it when she was sleeping in the train. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you for a
Thank
wonderful
you.
film. Thank you for coming.